So, how many of you like to go hiking? Do you go hiking with your family? With your class. Are any of you in Scouts? They do hiking a lot, don't they? Yeah. Well, there's hiking you do when you don't have a destination, and there's hiking you do when you do have a destination. But I've got one that's fun that we used to do when I was in Scouts. We used to go on a penny hike, where we take a penny. Well, now because of inflation, it's probably a quarter. But we used to take a penny, and we'd get to a corner, and we'd flip the penny, and if it was heads, we'd turn right, and if it was tails, we'd turn left. Now, in that block, everybody had to find something that they had never noticed before. And it's always fun to do this in a neighborhood that you know, because you think you know everybody's yards and all that stuff. But everybody has to find one thing that they never saw before. Mrs. Jones painted her front door red. I didn't ever realize that. Look at that neat bird at the bird feeder. Did you know the Thompsons had a swing in their front yard? I never noticed that. Somebody planted tomatoes in between the roses. Isn't that cool? So, you'd have to get to the corner and you'd have to tell everybody what you saw. Then you'd flip the coin and then you'd decide which way you were going next. And that's always fun because it's unexpected. You don't know where your hike is going to take you. And sometimes that happens in life too. You think you're on a path, and then you find out that there's a new path that has merged off from the path that you think you're on. And then you stand at the corner in your mind and you say, should I take the new path? Should I stay on the old path? And you'll have a lot of those decisions to make as you get older. And that's about school, it's about where you'll live, it's about what courses you'll take. It's even friends. Should I stay in this friend group? Should I make new friends? So those are all kinds of decisions you're going to have to make someday on the path that you call your life, which is always exciting and sometimes a little scary. Okay? You can go off to your class now, and I know you know the path on the way to class. I'm Mary Ellen Morgan, your sabbatical minister, and I will be with you for 2 more months. Yay. Will you join me in a moment of prayer and reflection? Spirit of life and love, we find ourselves today at another crossroads, another time of looking forward, looking back, and wondering sometimes which way to go. Be with us in these moments when we feel alone on the path, when the way ahead is murky, and we find ourselves alone without traveling companions. These days can be trying, but there are moments of joy and wonder, and help us to find those in our lives. Will you join me in a moment of a silent meditation? 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. And as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lie. In leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted that I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. I fell in love with this poem when I was in college, and my professor introduced me to Robert Frost. At that age, I was standing at the crossroads of my own life, knowing the direction I wanted to take, but also understanding that the way might not be direct. I realized that my life would take me down many paths, and I would have opportunities to choose some of them. Some would feel conventional, some would be out of the norm. Sometimes I would feel as if I had no choice, but each and every one of them would lead me to new ones. It's true that as you get older, you can look back to review your journey and see where you may have made a different decision and how the roads you took created who you became. Kierkegaard reminds us that life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. We have just witnessed one of our Unitarian Universalist rites of passage. The other are child dedications, weddings, and memorial services. All of these are to help us mark the important milestones within our community. It's a particular privilege and delight to watch our children grow up in our congregations and to help their parents launch them into the world. Some will leave here reluctantly. Some children will cling on to what they know by wanting to stay here. Some will leave gleefully and quickly. Some will come back from school on holidays, and as the years pass, you'll have deeper conversations with them about college majors and internships and the wonderful opportunities they're taking for their own lives. We all hope that the foundation we've given them in our religious education classes, and sometimes more importantly in how we have lived our lives in this congregation, while they have watched our example, will help them when they are faced with their own life's challenges. They will make mistakes, take chances. Sometimes they'll succeed, and sometimes they'll spend time reclaiming themselves when their decisions have led them to become someone they no longer recognize. Typically, our children will throw what they've learned from us away, and then the day will come when they'll sift through all those lessons to see which still hold meaning for them when they are held up to the light. We hope that they remember and come back to help us build the Unitarian Universalist faith of the future. For we cannot foresee how the work they do today, or the work we do today with them, may be important for them and the world to come. We can only hope that they will take up the work we started. Several years ago, my husband and I served as advisors to the youth group teens in our UU church. It was wonderful watching these young ones grow in spirit, body, and mind over the 4 years they spent with us. Some came to church because their parents brought them. Some came because a friend invited them. Soon we had 65 teens in our group, and the conversations and worship services they created were poignant and deeply meaningful. And I still think it's some of the best church work I've ever done. We had 2 at-risk youth in our teen class, one of them a foster child who built his family within our youth group after his parents died and the relatives who took him in were abusive. He really blossomed in that youth group. A child who could not look at you when you talked to him 2 years later was leading worship for the group. One Sunday, as the teens were gathering on the lawn before their class, a policeman walked through the campus and told this African-American teen that he did not belong there and to move along. The teens surrounded him and told the police, "He is one of us." Believe me, our social justice director called the police chief on Monday morning and was told that they were no longer allowed to harass our children, no matter if they thought they looked like they belonged. We knew who did, and our children did too. And that group was open to all who wanted to be there. It was encouraging and humbling to see how their faith had them move forward on that day, and that they had no hesitation to stand up for their values. My husband and I saw many examples like this where these children were saved by our love and our values. I was so glad to see that Brian and Jason Laderman Jones had established a youth group not only for our teens, but teens in the neighboring UU churches. Youth groups have been important to both the Universalist and the Unitarian faiths for over 150 years. And these two groups merged before our denominations did. In the 1960s, we had LRY, Liberal Religious Youth. In the 1980s, it became YRUU, Young Religious Unitarian Universalists. But about 10 to 15 years ago, the Continental YRUU was disbanded, and there has been no dedicated programming for our teens from the denomination, something they are trying to now rectify. What we have has all been dependent on our local churches in the last few years. This lack of youth participation in our continental programming has been painfully evident and was even mentioned during our General Assembly earlier this week. I'm glad that we're making room for all the ages of our children within our fellowship. It's given us a chance to pass along our values to the next generation. One of the prominent lessons is our sexuality curriculum, our whole lives, and that one of the lessons that we learn is the parents are the primary teachers of their child's sexual knowledge. But that also extends to the lessons in everyday life. I'm going to make a hard switch here in the middle of my sermon to recognize that today is also Father's Day. I am reminded of the importance of the father or the father figures in our lives. And as I said on Mother's Day, mothering or fathering is not gender specific. And as I said on Mother's Day, some of you are fathers. All of you had at least one, some absent, some present, and some of you sought out a fathering influence in your lives if one was not fully present. Over the years, our image of fathers has changed. 75 years ago, fathers were considered wise and all-knowing, most of whom were removed from the issues at home, but were considered the head of the household. When feminism rose in the 1960s, the image of men started to change, and it seemed as though for women to rise, men needed to be shuffled aside. I believe this hurt all of us. It was probably typical that in order to change systems that had been placed in hundreds, if not thousands of years. But unfortunately, I'm still seeing some advertising that depicts men as hopeless without the women to guide them through even the simplest tasks. This attitude has not helped us, and although feminists believed that men were not necessary in building families of the world, that is not true. And that does not hold with our values. I'm hopeful that we will create a world where all sexes are respected and the gifts they bring to the family and this world are all important and respected. And when I say family, that could be your chosen family as well. We are a faith who values every person and sees their inherent worth and dignity, celebrating the milestones with our members and knowing through the joy and sadness that this is our church home to the glory of life.